Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 4 of I Bleeping Love Packaging, a podcast for people who bleeping love packaging, and for those who just don't know it yet. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Kris from EngView. It's going to be a great interview to learn about EngView, their software capabilities, and how they're entering the packaging market and what they've been doing for the last 25 years. So, hope you enjoy. Okay, so welcome back to I Bleeping Love Packaging. I'm AJ. I'm here today with Kris Hanchette, if I said that right.
Yes,
Awesome.
perfect.
Cool. Kris is with EngView, and he's the North American president there. And it's an awesome company. I'm gonna let him tell you a little bit about it. But Kris, if you want to introduce yourself a little bit and your background and talk about EngView for a hot second, and then we'll kind of get into how you got in there and your background.
Excellent, AJ, and thanks for the introduction, and then thanks for having me on the show. Excited to be here. I feel like Chris Farley, like coming out of the basement, in Saturday Night Live.
I'm actually in the basement right now. I don't know if you know, like I'm in New York and like it's cold, and I ran out of we're totally going sidebar. I ran out of propane the other day, and so like I'm running on a coal stove right now, and it's freezing in the basement right now. So if you see me like rubbing my hands or like blowing in my hands, it's because it's cold down here. So, anyways,
I totally understand it. I grew up in Central Illinois, and we had basements. The joke was I was going to strap a snowblower on the roof, drive south until somebody had asked me what that thing is, and we made it. We made it to Dallas, and there's no basements. Come to find out.
there you go.
Yeah, so my background is interesting. I got a degree in robotics, a degree in electronics. I learned to program in the sixth grade, and I got 2 associate's degrees and got tired of going to college. And maybe I should have finished it, but my life worked out just fine. I paid my way through college working at Chuck E. Cheese Pizza, and eventually made it to Texas. Had a few cool stops, and I started with this manufacturing company as the seventh person, and it was cool. Ken Coling was an amazing visionary, and we ended up growing that company 20% a year for 20 years straight. And we built CNC routers and lasers and knife cutting machines, water jets, all kinds of fun stuff. We ended up selling it to a private equity firm. I took over as CEO. 5 years later, I sold it to another private equity firm. I made it about a year, and then they fired me and put somebody else in charge. And man, I was devastated. I mean,
Yeah.
because I started that when I was 22, and at 44 years old, it was like, somebody took my child and I had no longer had visitation
I
rights,
was gonna say, like, it was drinking age at that point by the time you'd been there. Like, you'd been there long enough where, I mean, that it was your baby. Like, you'd sent your baby off to go have its first beer at that point, right?
Well, yeah, we took it from like $1 million in revenue to $50 million in revenue, and we became a worldwide company. And I went to like 20 some odd countries, and in every state but four. And when I was growing up in Central Illinois, I didn't even think I was going to leave the state, let alone the country. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, that's wild. And I know that you'd said, you were interested in coding in 6th grade, right? So you started learning to code. What did that look like? What language were you learning? Like, what does 6th grade look like back in the day for coding versus like, now they're doing like Hatch, which is totally different. But like, what does
so
that
I'll
look
be
like then?
55 years old next week.
I wasn't gonna have you age yourself. I mean, you can do that, but I wasn't gonna do it.
So I had a Commodore 64. It was kind of a funny story. I was like refusing to read because I'm dyslexic, and my parents ended up buying me this Commodore 64 and set it in my room. And I'm said like, "Aren't you going to set it up?" And they're like, "No, read the manual." So I started reading, and I read the manual, and I set it up. My first coding was actually in BASIC. Back then you could get a book and you could start like writing programs in BASIC from a book, and they were really basic stuff where a little skier or something going down a hill. But then eventually I kept growing with it. And when I ended up at the CNC manufacturing company, I fell in love with Linux. And I was so blessed. There was this guy by the name of James Fillmore, and he was this phenomenal programmer. We were getting our controls and stuff from him. And he got me involved in Linux, and I started to learn Perl and PHP and MySQL. And I wrote our entire quoting and order system and all that. And it was just fun. I mean, nobody told me I couldn't do it. So like, I just went and did it.
Yeah, it sounds like similar. Like when I started out in CAD, I started out in Rhino. It was like my first CAD program, and then kind of have like you take that foundation and you kind of move it into other stuff, right? So I've done like a whole bunch of other CAD programs now at this point, but you kind of take that foundation of like they're all different languages, all those different coding languages, but you kind of have to build on them as you grow, right? It's a similar kind of situation.
Yep. And by the way, my CAD kind of there was a program called Casmate that I was
Okay.
using in DOS. And then I ended up getting pretty good with AlphaCam at the time, and InRoute and a few other things. But yeah, it was a fascinating journey, but it was all kind of just back to the tools. We were all trying to get tools to solve problems. And if we could solve problems for our customers, then they wanted to buy stuff from us.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best way to do it. I mean, you wanna solve a problem, you don't wanna just make something and then hope it solves a problem, right? Like, it's always the best way to do it is, like, come up with what is the problem first, because, otherwise you're just making something and hoping it sticks, right? And it seems like
Exactly.
that's kind of the approach you guys are taking at EngView. The from what I've seen and what you've talked about in other podcasts and stuff, is it really feels like it was built from the ground up with a solution in mind, as opposed to like a problem that then you guys kind of just like slapped a solution on top of. You know what I mean? Like it was built with a customer in mind.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, it's based out of Bulgaria, and you think about most of us on our worst days, I mean, we still have it pretty good. At the time when they were developing the software, the Russian communist rule was just leaving. They had an incredible local university that was graduating high-level mathematicians and computer scientists, and the guy that founded the company, he ended up going to work for this it was a publishing firm or something like that, and he didn't have enough money to buy a computer. Okay, so he didn't have enough money to buy a computer. So during the day, he would be like their IT support and that kind of stuff. And in the evening, him and his guys would start writing their software. And somewhere along the way, they met this company in Turkey. And that company did die making, did packaging and all kinds of stuff and displays, and they embedded themselves in there for 2 years. And they were originally writing something to compete with AutoCAD, but they this was like a gift that fell in their lap because AutoCAD's like the 800-pound gorilla, and so they developed this software around the real customer's workflow and real needs, and then from there they continued to grow it and they built some great relationships. And you probably heard of Heidelberg. About 20% of all our programming goes to Heidelberg and these different companies, but they've always been very customer focused and they want to solve user issues. How do we make it easier? How do we make it better? And I think that's been a huge part of the success.
What does that workflow kind of look like? So like as a customer who comes in, like so I've used it for I did the 10-day trial, right? And I'm probably gonna grab a license. We'll talk about that at a different time. We're not gonna negotiate a license on a podcast. But I really enjoyed it. I think it's a different take on packaging software that I've used in the past, and I really like it. I'm a big fan of parametrics in general. I've used them in other CAD programs. It's just really great for resizing. But what does that look like when you guys have a customer come in and be like, "Hey, I need this new feature," or like, "I really wish it did this." Does that go through, your guys' software team, or how do you guys rank what features come in and make it to the next release or make it to a release?
That's a great question. I would say that like when I first started, it was kind of the Wild West, and everybody had to fight for their own projects. And I think that's similar in most kind of cases. So the other question becomes how often did we get the request? How hard is it to do? Is it going to help us in the market? Is it going to help our customer base? This kind of stuff. We've kind of evolved it a little bit now, where we use HubSpot as a CRM, and we actually create tickets in there now, and then we all review them at some point, and people go like, "Oh, cool, that's really good," or that. But it's a little bit different too, where like let's say that you found a real problem, like, "Hey, man, this 3D model isn't looking right," or whatever. Those always go to the priority. So we jump all over anything that affects your ability to do your workflow or something that's just inconvenient. Those get hit first. Then if it's like, "Hey, man, if you could add the flux capacitor, that'd be great. What is it going to take?" And then we go back and try to figure out how to do it. And Stasso, we got this amazing, like, he's a genius mathematician, and he can usually him and his team can probably figure out how to do almost anything because he's a real genius.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, well, it's great to hear because, like, as somebody who's worked with other CAD companies and stuff in the past, like, there is sometimes a struggle to figure out, like, where does that request go through, or how do you get that new feature put in? And it's good to hear that you guys are like interacting with your customers. You guys have a ranking system of some sort to push that stuff through, and that's fantastic.
We kinda do the same too with our videos, and so you got to play around with the software and you've seen some of the videos. A lot of the videos we create a lot of unlisted videos for just quick answers, but if we start getting common questions, then we take a little bit of time and usually try to create a more, nice splash screen, a little more professional video, or if we never get around to it, we send people links to the unlisted ones. But it's most of the videos that we create, we're not dreaming up. They're coming directly from customers, and we're wanting to answer those questions. And then over time, our actually programmers look at those videos and say, "Hey, maybe we could make this workflow better." So some of the ideas too may not even be requested ideas, but they're looking at how like I myself and other people are using the software, and they're like, "Well, we never intended it to be that way, so let's make it better." Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other great resource I think was is the YouTube channel because as somebody who's a visual learner, like I can get a manual and I can read through something and I can make it work, but being able to see a tutorial and being able to copy that tutorial and learn from it is just like a huge resource. And having that on YouTube for free is huge. And I would recommend if anybody's looking at EngView, check out the YouTube channel first and get in there and look at it and kind of watch it. And it gives you a good representation of what the software does and what it's capable of doing. And if you're a CAD person, like you can kind of get the idea of what it is. And then you can get that 10-day trial and then you kind of hit the ground running. That's kind of what I did was I wanted to learn a little bit first. And then I contacted you guys and was like, let's get this going, you know?
Yeah, no, and it works out really well, and it's funny too. It kind of came out of a need when I was first doing this. We had all kinds of great manuals and documentation and help docs and all that, but I'm definitely ADD. I'm definitely dyslexic. I don't like sitting down and reading a bunch of documents, and so for me, I started creating the videos. And initially, I kind of created the videos almost for myself, so I wouldn't forget things. And then all of a sudden, they started taking off, and we were hearing back from kids in colleges and other things that are learning packaging. They're like, "Oh my god, I wish we every company did this. This is amazing, and it saves me so much time." And just like anything else, when people start giving you nice responses about what you're doing, you want to do more of it. And so, that's that's one of the things we do is we set up and we've added a lot of equipment. We've added cool microphones. I'm talking to you on a really nice Rode microphone right now, and added a high tech camera, even though people don't see it. So, what we're trying to do is do everything we can to make that experience better.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's one of those things that as it evolves, is it's definitely worth the investment because, like I said, it's just way easier to follow a tutorial than it is to follow a manual, at least for me. So I really appreciate the fact that you guys sink the time into it because I think it pays back. I think it's a big return on investment in general because people are more willing to learn it if it's easier to learn, right? So you're going to get more customers if it's a easier program. So when I was digging to try to find some sort of freelance software for me to use, I had to dig through Reddit in order to find about EngView. Okay, I'll be honest. Like that's where I found out about it, right? I was like digging through an old Reddit thread. So like who's your main target demographic when you're looking for like who are you guys pitching to on the most basis? Is it designers? Is it engineers? Is it, like plotting table companies? Is it kind of all the above? Like who's your main customer?
It's interesting, and it was funny, like, when I started this job a little over 3 years ago, I really didn't have a good feel of the industry. Like, my background, I knew the cutting table people, I knew the large format printers, I knew all that kinda stuff, and so it was kinda low-hanging fruit for me to kinda go after, and then after picking up the software, I realized, "Wow, this really improves the workflow, it makes it easy." We got nesting, we've got bleed optimization, we got all this fun stuff in there, and so I kinda targeted that initially, but overall, I mean, we've got some huge customers that have, hundreds of seats of the software and, large corrugators. We've got a lot of folding carton customers because we got some incredible folding carton tools. There's everything from small, like, signoramas to fast signs, all the way up to brand owners that, we got bicycle manufacturers that use it to build the boxes and put the hats in them. And there's also like agencies too, because we have this really cool augmented reality and 3D modeling. Sometimes they want to, let's say, do their own prototypes, do their own mock-ups and this kind of stuff, and then they'll send them off and somebody else will produce them. So it's kind of like at every little hit. And I'm always fascinated sometimes when I see how people use the software because, there's entry level versions all the way up to advanced versions. We have a lot of sign making companies. We've added a ton to the POP library aspect, and we've made it really easy to create like trade show booths, so not only doing POP in-store displays, but people are wanting to do more and more trade show booths where it's expensive to store some big trade show booth. It's expensive to ship and get it dredged into your booth. It's harder to change your image. But if you use like, some of the different Falcon board and, Reboard and, there's all kinds of brands of it. But if you use something like that, all of a sudden you can create something just in time. It's easy to put together. It's light. It has a great image for your, look. And then you can just recycle it after the show. You don't have to take it home. You walk out with your briefcase, so.
Yeah, no one wants to sit there and tear down a booth after a show. It's much easier to just say like, "Hey, scrap it," or like recycle it. I shouldn't say scrap it, recycle it, right? Get it out of here. My dad works in the trade show industry, so I know that pain. I've been to a couple of shows with him where I've had to. We actually rented a. This is totally sidebar. We rented an Uber Plus because we needed to bring some trade show parts and pieces into the show, and the Uber Plus wasn't big enough, so we ended up having to like throw the pieces over our shoulder and like huff it 2 miles, 3 miles to the convention center with these like long, I don't even remember what they were. I think there were parts to build these like display boards or something. But we had to like walk this huge length all the way to the convention center in the snow because it was in Boston. And I just Yeah, I don't know. It was one of those things where it would have been so much nicer if it was lighter and packed flatter. That's all I think about all the time.
I love trade shows. I've done tons of them in my career, and we do like Printing United and ISA, and we're actually going to the luxury packaging show in New York for the first time this year. Yeah, but it's fun. I mean, I when in my CNC days, I think my best year ever, I did 19 shows around the world, so it's kind of crazy.
That's a busy schedule. That's that's kind
Yeah,
of insane, actually. That's
you got
more
to
than
like
one a
people
month.
if
I
you're
mean,
gonna do that.
that's crazy. Yeah, wow. And then, so I also saw that you had a trade show background a little bit. And speaking of trade show stuff, do you think that that kind of helps when you start to tour all these trade shows? Like you kind of know what to look for and how to like talk to some of these trade show people of like, if you work with our software or whatever, you can, instead of having to build these big booths, you can use this and maybe build something on the fly.
Definitely. Early on, like when my CNC days, we were selling the cutting equipment to those companies to cut things out. And then, while I was like searching for my next mission, I actually went to work for the AWFS woodworking show, and I actually sold trade show booth space for about a year. And it was a blast. I was a 1099 guy, and I figured out I really loved working at home, and I was good at it. But I wanted to be back into technology, and so come around circle now doing the software, I've been able to have like all these different aspects of I sold the equipment to them. I've been an exhibitor. I did it a ton of times. Then coming with the software, that's where been a lot of the fun in this development side is I've kind of sat in each chair, and so it's the difference between empathy and sympathy.
Yeah, exactly. I feel that. And then as somebody who doesn't have like a traditional packaging background, right? Because you're coming from the robotic side of it, right? What is something that you think is like exciting that you've seen in the packaging industry as you've kind of delved deeper into it? When I've seen you do demos and stuff, you really seem to know your stuff about how things fold and how things come together and all that stuff. So you're really diving into packaging head first, which I appreciate as a packaging designer. But what is something that you've seen that's like surprising to you?
So first, there was kind of a rude awakening when I took this job. I thought I knew something about packaging. Come to find out, I didn't know anything about packaging. And
I feel like
and
that's kinda normal though, like, I feel like most people, I mean, we talked about it a little bit in one of my episodes, but, like, in for college, I mean, I started out as a package engineer at school, like, we had a very tight, small group, of people, and most people didn't start in that degree, and they kinda switch into that degree because they didn't even know it exists as an option until you get to school, so, anyway, sorry, not to cut you off.
No, that was great. Yeah. And then so along the way, what ended up happening is I would just do what I normally did most of my life. I would get in a demo and, a meeting, and I would start finding out what the customer's problems were. And I would start solving these problems. And it was really funny because I would have to go back and like look in the help or figure out how to do things and come back and answer a lot of their questions. And people started buying the software. And I remember asking the first guys like, why are you buying the software? And he's like, man, he goes, my guys like do this for a living and you don't even know what you're doing and you figured it out. So I guarantee we can figure it out, like, and then from there, it was kind of cool because the software is really incredible. It really solves a lot of the problems because we have structural engineers that have been doing this for 30 years. And, they've solved a lot of that structural engineering techniques and how, creases and cuts and folds and all that stuff are supposed to work. And so, we've simplified it, which is great. And I'm still learning about the core, let's say, specifics of that, but we've added artificial intelligence to the software. So let's say somebody gets a die line sent to them and you can automatically find it in the library. And we've had customers come back to us and say, hey, we've been making the same box for like 15 years and we found one in your library and it goes to better cleaner, it fits better, all that kind of stuff. So you're seeing artificial intelligence change things. And then I think you're seeing, the deep connection now between just in time. So it used to be like, hey, let's go make this huge run. We'll go make a whole bunch of boxes. But now you can do like really just in time where we can serialize things, we can change pictures of things, we can change material rapidly. And it's that all that quick workflow, it's everything that we're looking for now. And you don't have to have a bunch of stock on the shelf. You don't have to have a bunch of inventory. So I think those are the big things that I've seen that I like.
I appreciate the fact that with EngView, you have the 3D viewer inside of Illustrator, which is something that's really great for when you're trying to move fast and trying to work on smaller MOQs. Maybe you don't want to order a sample from your print supplier. Maybe you want to just kind of like bang it out and get it done. The 3D viewer inside of Illustrator makes a really great way to make a quick mock-up to show somebody.
Yeah, and now with augmented reality, it's kinda cool because you can make that mock-up, you can save like a 3D PNG file, you can put that, to show people, or you can send them a link, they can actually fold and unfold it in a basic browser, they don't have to even have any special software, but if you take your phone and you go to our YouTube channel, you can see this. You can take that item and you can drop it right on the shelf, or you can drop it right in the shop. And so before you make one, you can actually have a virtual prototype, which is amazing.
That's great because like I've done that in the past where, but it was like it's kind of hard because you had to export it out, bring it into another program, have a little like tracer code, right? You put that on the shelf, and then that's how you kind of like scale it all up and everything. But it's really helpful when you do that because you can bring your product right to like a Walmart shelf. And if you kind of dodge the employees really quick and you kind of spread a little spot on the shelf, you can put that right on the shelf and you kind of can take a planogram picture right there and compare
You
what
can
it
take
looks
a
like.
picture, you can take a video, you can do it right live. You just need your smartphone and nothing special. We also have customers that like end up getting with cool tools like Blender or something like that. You can export a 3D GLB file, you can bring it into Blender, and you can take your boxes and shelves and displays and all that, and you can put it right in the storefront. And it's just crazy where things are going.
Yeah. So when you're exporting out from the Illustrator file, are you able to pull that then into other rendering software, or are you just able to do it in that rendering view?
No, you have a whole bunch of options. I mean, you can output a STL, a GLB, a PNG, all these different things. The GLBs we really like because they're like lightweight. It's a lot used in a lot of virtual reality, but that can actually go right in directly into other software. So a perfect example is Blender. Blender's this open source, very cool 3D modeling software. And so let's say you design your box or, shelf or whatever, and you're inside of Illustrator, you got all your graphics on it, looks exactly like you want. You can go in there and just with a click and say, save this as one of these kind of 3D models. And then you can choose, do you want to be animated? Do you want to just be a still scene? What do you want? And then you can bring it into the other programs. The other option that we have too that's super cool is the opposite direction. So let's say you have SolidWorks or you have, that, and you can create your own 3D models. We have a lot of customers in the automotive and other areas where they actually design the packaging around the 3D models coming in from SolidWorks.
Everything was designed at my previous job in SolidWorks. We'd get those SolidWorks files and we'd import them into the CAD program I was using at the time, and we would design around them. So the fact that you can do that inside of this is also just super great because it makes it so much easier. You don't have to sit there and wait for a sample to come from your supplier or print one out. Like I have a 3D printer sitting next to me. Like I can print one and then measure it. But then if I don't have to do that and I can do it right in CAD, it just makes everything so much faster.
I need to get a 3D printer. I've got other cool stuff sitting next to me, but I don't have a 3D printer. That sounds like fun.
Yeah, it's okay. Sometimes it gets a little noisy, but it's fun to have. Can you import directly as a SolidWorks file, or do you have to bring it in as a specific type of like a step file or something?
Yeah, you need to, either like I said, a step. I mean, unfortunately for us, the SolidWorks is like a proprietary format, so we can't bring that in, but we can bring in all the standards. So there's a number of PD, and I don't have the list right on my head, but there's 4 or 5 that are built right into the software. I know STL,
Probably like a OBJ or something like that. Probably is
OBJ.
one. Yeah.
OBJ is really popular, and we actually include with the software a whole bunch of OBJ models for you that you can get started with too. And then what I find, like I said, is the GLBs I kind of love, easy to put outside of Illustrator and that too. But there's also libraries online. Sometimes when I'm looking for something, I'll go do a search on these free libraries and I'll download stuff. Or if I find something really cool and I like it, I'll even pay the artist. That's if you can pay them and get that. So it's the access now is just almost unlimited.
Yeah. The other thing too that I saw was you guys have some really great stuff for not only like your parametrics, but you also have like 3D parametrics that are also baked in too. So like when you're doing all your designing and everything like that, you have a great example with like the beer bottle case where you have like it goes from being a 12 pack to a 6 pack back up to a 40 pack, right? And you have your 3D already all baked into that. You guys have already programmed it to be parametric and 3D, which is awesome. Do you guys have anything that scales the actual primary, the bottle, so you could, like, maybe make your bottle a little fatter or skinnier? Or is that all just like, here's your, like, rough and tough bottle size that is like a standard bottle, and we're scaling from that?
You can fully scale the 3D objects. So when you bring them in, you can scale it based on distance, you can scale it based on percentage, but you can also take the X, Y, and Z, so it takes that overall and you can scale it from the X, Y, and Z, and do that. Pretty slick. But yeah, because you might end up getting a 3D model. And let's say like the other day I needed not a ping pong ball, but pickleball. So I needed a pickleball and I couldn't find a exact pickleball, but I found a white soccer ball, and then I just resized it down to a pickleball, and I put it inside my little pickleball holder and paddle, and it all worked out great. But that was a good improvisation using resizing.
Maybe I'm working on a beer brand and I'm gonna be using more like red stripe bottles as opposed to, Sam Adams bottles, and they're not tall necks, but they're little short necks, right? And it might be nice to be able to stretch and pull those, and it sounds like you guys already have that available right inside the software.
It's there.
That's awesome. That's great.
We're trying to think ahead of you.
Yeah, well, that's what I want. I don't have to request stuff. If that's the thing is like if I don't have to put a request in, that's perfect. That's what I want, you know?
You want a do what I mean button, not
Yeah,
do what I say, do what I mean.
yeah, yeah. The other thing I heard too when you guys were on another podcast, and again, I don't mean to be pitching other people's podcasts, but it was something I wanted to bring up was it sounded like there's the capability to bring in like a spreadsheet worth of information and kind of output a bunch of die lines all at once. How does that work? Like, I know you guys have an API, right? So, what does that API look like? Is it something that you like give to the customer and say, figure it out? Is it something you guys work with them with, or is it a toolkit? What does that look like?
Great question. We have like a customer in or North America that's like a $6 billion company, and they have multiple seats of the software, and they wanted an easy way to drop out of their ERP system a spreadsheet. Here's, they do some standard boxes, and they said, hey, we want to put in the length, the width, the height, the material thickness, whether it's inside, outside dimensions, and then have the program go to town for them. And so we have an API. They're all Mac based, by the way. So we created these tools working on the Mac. And so they basically pull up a spreadsheet. They click on a button inside the spreadsheet because we put a plug-in for it. It processes them, and then in an output folder, it drops out their output. And they could, if they had these capabilities in-house, they could access our API and do this programming. But a lot of people will either come to us first, we'll work back and forth on a spec, and we'll create like the initial process. Let's say you want to link into your online web shopping cart, or you want to look into an ERP, or you want to do a spreadsheet, or all this kind of stuff. We can do all that. And then it's just based on, what part do you want to own as a company? A lot of them like us to get started, but then they may want to take over the maintenance from there, or they may want us to do all the structure, maintenance, and everything moving forward. We're pretty flexible. We got a team of people can do that. And we just try to fit with the customer how they need us.
It seems like a very powerful way to like be able to integrate directly in with that company and really like be a partner as opposed to just like a supplier of software, right?
Yeah, what I find, and this is what it's the most cool thing we're doing, is a lot of designers are creative. So we want to free up all the non-valued time, the stuff that just doesn't add value, nobody likes to do. It's, the nesting, the layout, you know, the hard structural work, like you said, accessing stuff from a database. Any of that stuff we can automate and then let the customer focus on their creativity. Everybody wins, everybody's happier, everybody's more productive, and then we try to catch as many errors automatically in the background as possible.
Well, I know that we're like pressed for time. I know that I'm a little over on where I told you that we were going to be. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you're like, give me the pitch, like give me the last 30-second sales pitch you want for EngView or whatever it ends up being. I'll let you kind of like close it out.
Well, first I'll start with, AJ, it's been fun getting to know you. You're a super talent, and I'm glad you've started this podcast. I'm a little bit jealous because my plan was to actually start a podcast a couple of years ago, and I hadn't got to it yet. So I think that's really cool. I think that for me, I just love the journey. At the end of the day, we're having a lot of fun over here. We've got incredibly cool software. When we sell software to companies, our retention rates in like the high 90s, and we're out building partnerships and friends, and we're listening to their needs, and we're helping them solve problems. And that's what life should be about. And if we can continue that mission and we can keep, gathering ourselves with more cool friends, we're only going to be better.
I appreciate the fact that you've been so helpful, and it's wild to me to email the president of North America when I'm emailing, because I'll be honest, like when I first like reached out to get EngView, I was like, I'm going to get like stuck with a sales guy and whoever, and they're not going to really know a lot about the software. They're going to like end up hooking me up with somebody else. Like usually it's like you get with somebody and then they send you somewhere else and they send you somewhere else. And it's been refreshing to be with not only like, somebody who knows the software, but can like talk to it, give you a tutorial on it. Like we got on a call before and you've shown me how to do stuff on it. It's been really wildly refreshing. And, I think you've been really helpful, and I think it's an amazing piece of software.
And I don't want to extend too much longer, but I got you're going to love this quick story. So in my previous life, I was a manufacturing company. We were big. We had a couple hundred people, all that kind of stuff. And I was in an open house in Grand Rapids, and I had been talking to this guy. We're running the machine. He was a customer, and he's asking me great questions and all this kind of stuff. And finally, I get up. It's lunchtime. I give a quick speech, and then we all have lunch. And he comes over and he sits down to me, and he's next to me, and he goes, "You didn't tell me you were the president." And I go, and I'm thinking real quick, and I go, "Yeah, because you'd have treated me different." And he goes, "Yeah, I would have." And so I used to love to go to all these events and run the machines and have fun and integrate with customers, because they were all telling me stuff I would have normally never heard. If they thought I was the president for some reason, they would be more reserved. And so I never introduced myself as the president. I always like just being one of the team because it's much more fun. And everybody treats you different if you tell them you're the president. I don't want to be treated different.
Yeah. No, you get to have the like real hands-on experience if people are just like candid with you, right? So, no.
So that's my advice, whatever it's worth.
No, that's great. Well, if I become president someday of something, I will keep that in mind. I have a feeling it's gonna be a ways off from me, but we'll see how that goes. So
I'll vote for you.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Well, thanks, Kris. I appreciate it, man. This is awesome, and I can't wait to do more with EngView. I just appreciate you being on, and wish you the best, and wish EngView the best.
Awesome.
Cool. Thanks, man. Hey, everybody. Thank you again for listening to I Bleeping Love Packaging, a podcast for people who bleeping love packaging. And for those who just don't know it yet, if you can be so kind as to hit that like button or follow button or ring the bell so that you can get a notification whenever a new episode comes out, that would be greatly appreciated. It's people like you who grow this community and who grow these episodes. And I just like love everything that you guys have done so far for I Bleeping Love Packaging. If you want to get in contact with me, you can either drop me a line on LinkedIn or you can send me an email to ibleepinglovepackaging@gmail.com, and I'd love to connect with you and get you on the show. So send me a message, let's talk, and let's get you on I Bleeping Love Packaging. Talk to you then.